Hi everyone, thanks for coming back. Sorry for getting sidetracked in the last video, but I was just trying to explain how in Hebrew the word for overthrew is the Strong's number 2017, and how that year seems to come up in the tables as being in the middle, and why the middle is so important. And I was talking about the tree of life, how the tree of life will be in the midst of paradise in the book of Revelation, and then in Genesis 2 the tree of life was in the midst of the garden. And I had speculated that perhaps the tree of life might represent a DNA strand, and I had decided to do a table on that a few days ago. And so I had come up with this table over here, and I'll just go over this real quick and then I'll get back to Mark 11. But I just wanted to share this with you because I thought this was really interesting. But as you can see, it reads up here at the top: tree, life, river, DNA strand, seed, egg. And I had actually speculated that the river represents the DNA strand because it branches off into 4 rivers, and I just had a theory about that, but I don't want to get into that right now because I don't want to get too off track. But I'll just go ahead and quickly go over the terms. As you can see over here, it has DNA in the bluish purple, the letters D and A, and then river is right here in the lavender. You have the word egg coming up in the yellow, and then you have the word seed coming up in the green, the letters S, E, E, D. You have the word life coming up in the pink with the letters L, I, F, E, and then tree is coming up in the red with the letters T, R, E, E, and then strand is coming up here in the blue. And it's interesting where it comes up, but you can see it here with the letters S, T, R, A, N, D, and it's coming over here where it's talking about cleaving. And it says, I'll start with verse 23, which that's interesting, and that was actually part of my theory for why I thought the river represents the DNA strand, because it branched off into 4 rivers, and there's 4 gamete cells that are produced out of a single cell during meiosis, which is a type of mitosis. But over here it says, the man said, this is, well, let me start with verse 22. It says, and the rib which Jehovah God had taken from the man, he made a woman and brought her unto the man. And the man said, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of a man. And this is coming up in verse 23. And then it says, therefore shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And so the cleaving is the word that's described in the Bible for the joining together of the 2 DNA strands, and that comes up in the next verse. And that's exactly where you have the word strand coming up. You can see it over here. It says, she shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave. You see the word cleave right there, unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And so this is where you have the word strand, and then DNA was at the top. And it's interesting that you have 12 matches. I just realized that just now, because over here in Revelation 22:2, it says, and in the midst of the tree of it, and on either side of the river, was there a tree of life, which bare 12 manner of fruits, and yielded her fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. And so you have 12 matches. And so I just noticed that, but it only comes up that way if you put in the seed and the egg. When you take that out, it's actually 13 matches, because I just tried doing that. And when you do that, it comes up with 13 matches. But when you put seed and egg in there, which represents the cleaving, it comes up with 12 matches. Okay, so getting back to Mark 11, I thought this word overthrew was important because Jonathan Kleck talks about how we're right side up and upside down, and that you have to be converted or turned back again, which is what this word means, in order to be saved. And you see that over here in Matthew 18:3, where Jesus said, "Verily I say unto you, except ye be converted and become as little children, you shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven." And so you have to be converted. And this can be taken metaphorically in that, of course, you have to repent. You have to turn to God, turn away from the flesh, and turn to the Spirit of God in order to be saved. So this is a metaphorical, but I was wondering if this could also be literal in terms of the DNA, and I was wondering if the DNA is actually right side up and upside down. And so it didn't take very long before I realized that. I just had to watch a few short videos about DNA to realize that the two DNA strands, which make up the DNA strand, it's actually made up of two sides that make up the ladder. They're made up of alternating sugar and phosphates, and then you have the nitrogenous bases that make up the rungs of the ladder, and they could be one of 4 different nitrogenous bases. There's adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. But then you have the alternating phosphate and sugar that they're attached to, and then altogether this makes a nucleotide, and they're attached by the alternating phosphate and sugars, and then they're attached to each other by the hydrogen bonds that are in between. But these two, even though these two strands run parallel to each other, they're actually anti-parallel, because on one side you have one that ends with a sugar rather than a phosphate, and then on the other side you have a phosphate rather than a sugar. And so the ones that end with a sugar, they go from a 3' to a 5' direction. And then this one would go from a 5' to a 3' direction. And so you see the one that started with the 3' ends with a 5', and the one that started with the 5' ends with a 3'. Okay, so that's what makes up the DNA ladder, but it's actually twisted into the form of a double helix, as you can see here. And this actually has a right-handed twist because of your leading strand and your lagging strand, because this one is called the leading strand and then this one is the lagging strand, and it actually makes it have a little bit of a shift. And I can talk a little bit more about that, the right hand versus the left hand, a little bit later, but I just want to show you what happens when it replicates, because when the DNA strand replicates itself and it brings in the new nitrogenous bases, each strand makes a copy of itself, and then the leading strand, it copies in a 5' to a 3' direction, so it goes down that way in a continuous build. but this one builds up the other way, so it's going in an opposite direction, and because of that it has to do it a little bit at a time as it unzips itself to create this fork. So it does a few at a time in the 5 to 3 prime in fragments in a discontinuous build. So it does it in fragments, and the fragments are called Okazaki fragments, but it does it a little bit at a time, and this one goes up in this direction and the other one goes down in this direction. So they're like right side up, upside down. And so when you go back over here to Mark 11:4, it says, and they went their way and found the colt tied by the door without in a place where two ways meet. The two ways could be construed as going in opposite directions, such as you see like in this image right here. So you see one's going in the upward direction, which could be construed as this strand, but it's actually in reverse because this one's going down and the other one's going up. But in this image you have one going up, the other one going down. So that's how the DNA strand would be in relation to each other, and then the fork would open up. And this is important because I want to go back to Amos 8 because this is a very important chapter as well that I want to talk about. I actually found a table that comes up in Amos 8 that I want to show you next. But this is very important because they're saying over here, when will the new moon be gone? That we may sell corn, and the Sabbath that we may set forth wheat, making the ephah small and the shekel great, and falsifying the balances by deceit. And when they're saying, when will the new moon be gone? They're saying, when will, in the Hebrew, it's saying, when will the new moon pass over? This word for gone is pass over in the Hebrew, as you can see here, or cross over, means to cross over, and then in the Greek it's a word that means crossroads, which is this word right here. And I've already shown you how this word means a crossroad, and it also makes the sign of a cross or a crucifixion, or it can make the sign of a crucifixion, because if you look at images of crossroads, they can either look like a fork in the road or they could look like a cross. But in the case of the DNA strand, you would have one road going in one direction and then the other road going in the other direction. But when a cell gets ready to divide, the DNA actually condenses, and it first wraps around these spools called histones, and they actually get this name because of the way the DNA coils, because it looks like a snake, and so that's where the name histones comes from, because it coils around the little spools, and then it eventually condenses into chromatids, which are pairs of DNA chromosomes, and they're linked together by a centromere, and so they look like little crosses once the chromosomes get ready to divide during mitosis. And this is important because Amos 8 talks about a crossing, and I just want to quickly show you the table that I did. I actually did a table on the word Pascha, which is the word for Easter in the Orthodox Church. And there's just two matches for this word, as you can see here, and one of them comes up in Amos 8, and here it is with some more terms added into it. You can see the words wine, bread, Passover, Red Sea, earth, Adam, and war. And so you see all these words came up in ELS form, most of them. And I'll go over this table in the next video because I'm about out of time. So I'll have to continue in the next video. Thank you.